Where Loyalties Lie, Chapter 16, no, 14, Reunions, by Loyalliar. Solo soared through the chilled air, reveling in the sharp contrast it offered to the warmth that had filled her flanks only a moment earlier. North Baltimore had been a city slumbering in the night, and while the South was lovely in the darkness, even its lights had been left behind. All that was left was the great swamp, and the little tendrils of civilization struggling to burrow into its depths. The first of these bastions of order and organization visible over the towering canopy of elms and maples and willows was a white manor house. The patches of moss visible on the crumbling shingles and holes in its roof suggested it would give way to the reclaiming vines and roots of the swamp. In the meantime, it was a place of dark shelter and secrecy, removed from anywhere that decent ponies would dare set foot. There were no guards, because such a thing would be stupid. The road leading up to the structure was completely unmanageable, and as overgrown and dense as it was, only Wings let the young Canterlot smuggler approach, and even then she did so out of desperation. She needed to find shining armor, but the task was made difficult by their previous rough parting. She had no idea where the captain ran off to, and her hopes of tracking him from the city hall had been shattered by a clone sign. That left only one lead, provided by her unfortunate partner, and led to the creepy, run-down house where a little light was visible between the rotting rafters. She soared down toward it slowly until she could make out a faint whispering. To avoid drawing attention to herself, she landed on a sturdy-looking beam and creaked loudly under her weight. "Who's that?" The voice was gruff and loud, but also familiar. The sounds of steps on loose floorboards brought recognizable Griffin into view. Solo had met him no more than 2 hours prior, under less serious circumstances.
The old house is falling apart, Alexandros. It's just the floorboards."
The second voice was boorish, or, more accurately, boorish and belling.
"Do you have the lodestone cone?"
"Right here." The familiar Griffin answered, producing a rough cone of dark gray rock from beneath his wing. He walked back toward the boar's voice, accompanied by the sound of floorboards croaking beneath a shift in his body weight. "But we don't need it yet, right? She's out cold."
"Hitting someone over the head is a science, idiot. It can take up room soon. She could wake up soon, and I'd like to be out of here before she does."
Solo had to guess the voice belonged to Batar, the boar of the strange trios he had met earlier in the night.
"Where in the void is the thief? He is supposed to be back here by now."
"If I had to hazard a guess, probably running the brains out of that ponius." The Griffin's feet hovered between the awkward paws. "What do they call their females again?"
"Most Alexandros. If you are planning on working in the Equestria anymore, you should take the time to learn that."
"Pah! The ponies don't even have wars anymore. What kind of work are we likely to get here? Give me my own kind any day."
"Say what you like, but Masquerade pays well."
"I still don't trust her. You saw what she did to that big pony we brought her. Makes my feathers stand on up."
"Yeah, well, it wasn't."
The word stopped instantly to the sound of loud wooden creaking. Solo froze in pace, but she knew all too well that the sound hadn't come from her own support. Something else was there. The boar picked up his words a moment later.
"I'm going to go check it out. You watch the unicorn."
The sound of a door opening on rusted hinges served as the prelude to the boar's slow steps. With only one of the criminals left in the room, Solo saw her chance. She gripped her stolen knife between her teeth and dropped down through the hole in the ceiling, using her wings to soften her landing. There was still a sound, which ought to have attracted the Griffin's attention, were it not completely overridden by a far more potent noise. The scream was the boar's. It was sharp and pervading in the relative quiet of the massive house. However, perhaps most notably, it was also very short. With the Griffin Alexandros distracted by the sound, Going Solo took the opportunity to dive out of sight behind a dusty plastic-covered couch nearby. As she moved, she caught her first decent glance at a full room, although it only lasted for a moment. All she cared to note was the scattering of furniture, and the unconscious unicorn crumpled over in an armchair. White Flag looked terrible, with a massive bruising from her neck, just above the shoulder. Solo crouched down behind the couch, pressed her head against the floorboards. The damp smell of mildew was strong, but the little crack of vision between the bottom of the couch and the floor was worth it. Alexandra's paws and talons placed slowly toward the door, though her vision ended at their ankles. It was perhaps halfway across the room when the motion became irrelevant. There was no better way to describe the event than to say that the door exploded. A shower of splinters and dust erupted from the former entryway, followed by a short gasp of pain. The griffin stepped back as the heavy footballs moved forward out of the cloud. It was clearly a pony. An off-white coat ended in four of the largest hooves Solo had ever seen, all covered in blazed steel hooves. Their strides forward were accurate, steady, and intimidating. "Baltar!" Alexandra shouted. Their hooves moved forward. The griffin stumbled back. "Look, you can take him. Just let me go." "What are you planning on to do with her?" The voice was surprisingly female. Given the likely size of its owner, Solo had trouble imagining a mare attached to those massive hooves. "I'm not!" One of the enormous hooves lifted off the ground. Baltar screamed alongside a crisp snap, not unlike a cracker being broken in half. A moment later, something long and curved and white fell onto the floor. Solo had to stare at it for a moment to recognize it as a tusk, snapped off at the very base. Her heart skipped in surprise. "Answer me." The mare's voice was the only calm noise in the room, yet it came across clearly over the gasping of the griffin and the bellowing of the boar. "Suda, we're taking her to Sweden." "Thank you. Thank you." The mare's legs shifted, and Baltar fell to the floor. Almost immediately, one of her hooves lifted, out of Solo's line of sight. It returned to the floor wet, following a muffled gurgling and a small puddle that began to grow around her hooves. As if angry at the wet mass adorning her fetlocks, she began to walk toward the griffin. "What? Stay back!" He was clearly desperate. He moved to the chair where Flag was lying, unconscious. One of his talons rose to the ground, no doubt wrapped around her throat. "I'll kill her! Let me go, and you can have her." The mare's response was calm and collected. Her left forehoof slid smoothly out of its shoe. The weapon sat momentarily on the ground, but it did not go undisturbed long. What followed was hard for Solo to track from her hiding place, especially given the speed of it all. A hoof stamped in the back of the shoe. Flipping it into the air, one might bounce a bit. As it lifted up, the mare turned around, bringing her back legs to bear. They lifted up in one call a buck, preceding the ringing clarion of a call of metal striking metal. Then there came the clear whistling of a blade speeding through the air, which ended in an almost indescribable fleshy tone. The whole process took less than a second. Alexandra's collapsed on the floor. The mare's shoe was buried all the way through his throat, deep enough to be touching his spine. She walked over to him, retrieved the bloody shoe, and returned it to its place on her hoof. She didn't even bother to wipe it down. Then she turned. "Come out, mare. I know you're there." Solo looked up, simply unable to move. The hooves came closer, stopping immediately on the other side of the couch behind which she had intended to hide. Then, with little more effort than one might expect it would take to sneeze, the furniture was gone, and Solo was hidden no more. The other mare was an earth pony, with short but loose eggshell mane hanging around her off-white coat. Her body matched her hooves in enormity, towering over Solo not only by a head, but a fair force of the neck as well. She spoke again in her calm contralto. "Well, it's masquerade." I, I, I don't know," Solo shouted, leaping backwards with wings. I'm, I'm, it's, I'm not with them. I was trying to find Captain Armor." "Can you prove that?" The words betrayed Solo's lack of confidence in the face of the towering killer. The earth pony strode forward slowly, closing the gap Solo made with her wings. She then realized it had been the wrong choice when she glanced up, and realized that the earth pony now stood between her and the hole in the ceiling that was her only escape route. She very nearly panicked when she felt cold, musty wood against her back. There was nowhere else to go. The Pegasus and the Earth Pony both turned toward the sound of a unicorn's voice. Wait, Captain. White Flag stepped down out of her dusty chair onto shaky hooves, and then held up a leg that seemed to indicate a reprieve. Alexandra's blood dripped from her face, having fallen there from the Earth Pony's fatal attack. She's not one of them. Damn, the boy hits hard.
You survive,
The captain responded.
Did they do anything permanent?
Flag shook her head quickly. They didn't even drug me. Amateurs. Got lucky sneaking up on me like that. I was expecting you. The rolling of her neck produced a series of very distinct pops as her spine set back into place. Then she slid a hoof over her face, wiping away the sickening red. Nothing like a splash in the face to wake you up. Captain, the civilian there's going solo. Alma needed her as an aide de Grizzaloo, and I understand she's been accompanying them. Solo, this is Captain Sozeron of the Honor Guard. Recognizing the name from numerous mentions in Shining Armor's company, Solo found herself unable to do anything more than stare at the pony in awe. It was much easier to take White Flag's earlier warnings while standing in front of the mare. You heard of me. On focused her attention back on the civilian pony, and her unusually placid expression turned to a frown. What are you doing here in Baltimore? We thought Masquerade was here. Solo blurted out, hoping to grab the attention of the two soldiers, but Shining was poisoned.
What?
Flag's drowsiness swept away in a shocking statement.
That would explain a lot.
Soldieron muttered aloud, though much more to herself than the other two mares.
He's north, across the river, Somerset Apartments, number 8112, when I last saw him.
On took 2 heavy steps toward the door before Flag stepped into her path. Flag seemed surprised at her comment. You aren't coming?
No. I am going to Shrida to kill Masquerade.
Rather than gasping out in shock, the older of the guard's ponies put a hoof into her muzzle in annoyance, just below her horn. I hope you aren't thinking of fighting her alone. She killed the commander.
It wasn't a fair fight.
On muttered coldly, and above all, factually. Solo took sudden notice of the athletic scowl that seemed to spread down from White Flag's horn to her royal blue face. Ignoring the tactician, On moved to the racket stand once by the door.
I am leaving tonight.
Wait! White Flag yelled, a tinge of desperation. If you're going that far, at least come with us to the safe house and gear up. You'll need lodestone to fight a mace like her.
Fine.
The Earth Pony stomped out of the room. Solo moved to follow, only to be caught by White Flag's outstretched leg. The desperation of past moments lingered in her expression, and her voice whispered forcefully. When I tell you to, you're going to fly north of the river and find Shining Armor. I have to take her alive, which means there's going to be a fight if that you wouldn't survive. Do you understand? Yeah, I got it. Solo spread her wings to slap away the guard's pony's leg, accompanying the motion with a cynical glare. Flag responded by donning a blank expression and making her way down to the ancient house. Shining Armor stumbled down the road. He popped the shoulder of his left foreleg back into place, yet it still felt off. Even that lingering trouble was nothing, however, when compared to the awkward void he felt in his horn. It had taken him almost an hour to wander down to the docks and hire a ride across. In that time, his magic ought to have begun to regenerate. Instead, he felt completely spent and empty. The painful stress of having overspent himself was absent, leaving him wondering exactly what was wrong. He stumbled his way to a huge open-air marketplace, totally devoid of shoppers at 1 in the morning. Oil streetlights ignited his path, but the side streets were paved with window shadows. He was aiming for the honor guard's safe house that White Flag had given him directions to, though the eggs across his body kept suggesting that just about any hotel would do as well. When his legs stumbled again, near the center of the market square, he decided it was time for a break. A huge fountain decorated the center of the area, and with very little effort, he sidled over to it, leaning against the low railing that held in the water. A glance upward saw Shining face to face with a smoothly sculpted stone dragon. Four indistinct guard ponies stood atop the corpse, while a fifth held a spear that had been driven home in its neck. Unlike the others, her face was revealed beneath a helmet as both distinct and familiar. Shiny didn't know the history of the statue, but he recognized the mare. In a haze of fatigue, his mind wandered to the day he had first met his predecessor, Unending Vigil. The statue portrayed her as a young, bright-faced, though Shiny knew better. Even during the Dragon Wars, the captain had looked like he was pushing 60. He heard that it had been in her intent to retire those 20 years ago, but that was before White Flag's incident. Shining Armor's thoughts were swept away as his ears perked to the sound of wind flowing over wings. As he glanced upwards to observe a dark red Pegasus flying toward him in a rather tacky noir-style trenchcoat. A moment later, the stallion landed at only a speaking distance away.
Captain Armor, it is you truly. I am surprised you are here.
The stallion guy's tone was short and emphatic, suggesting urgency. Red ink, Shiny nodded, casting a firm glare in his counterpart's direction. Are you here for Soldier On or Masquerade?
Inked seemed surprised by the question. My guards say that Masquerade has not been in Baltimore for weeks at least, but I have tracked On here and I intend to claim her.
The honor guard looked over Shining's body, obviously noticing his bruises.
I see you have tried once already. You are still alive and your horn is still attached. So perhaps I am giving Royal Guard too little credit.
Glad to see your opinion of the Royal Guard has improved.
You misunderstand me, Armor. I am meaning you. Royal Guards are still pathetic. You alone are a decent fighter.
Shining's face furrowed to a brown that Ink bluntly ignored.
That is why I make offer to you. I have ambush set up for On here in coming hours. White Flag is leading her here soon. If you will help me, we have better chance to take her living.
Shining elevated an eyebrow in surprise. You want my help?
Personal grudge are stuff of full storybook. I do not live through revolution by trying to be hero, fighting things on my own, well, save dragon. But this is different. I am not fool enough to think I will be better stallion for taking On alone. I find satisfaction when she is brought justice, not by humiliating her myself.
He chuckled.
That would only be pleasure. If you are helping me here, perhaps we forget about our bet on here and consider only Masquerade.
Shining was about to comment on his lack of magic when the sound of heavy shoes hitting cobblestone echoed up the street leading south from the market. Ink's head shot toward it, and he took the wing.
Already? Listen, Armor. Many shop buildings here. Get her inside one and grab oil lantern. I will take care of the rest.
Ink shot into the sky, leaving Armor alone to rest against the fountain and struggle for magic that would not come. He saw them approaching, three wide. Soldier On was in the center. Her mane hung down loose over her neck, rather than the tight ponytail she wore earlier. The chains did a surprising deal to help hide the absence of her right ear. Otherwise, nothing about the mare differed from their previous encounter, little more than an hour past. She fixed Shiny with a surprised gaze and turned toward him. The second of the approaching group was White Flag, who remained completely unchanged since they had spoken over dinner. She seemed concerned to see the captain resting against the fountain. It was the third approaching, however, that put a knot in the guard's pony's stomach.
Shining,
Solo muttered aloud before diving forward in the air. Are you all right? Shining Armor gasped in pain when the Pegasus tackled him in a tight hug. The sore bruises on his chest screamed of resistance, though the pain faded to a sort of warm comfort as the mare embraced him. He leaned back to answer the motion, before Keynes' face filled his mind. With a sudden discomfort, he pushed Solo away. I'm fine. Why wouldn't I be? Because Masquerade had you poisoned. The White Flag responded, walking forward slowly to join in the conversation. She's gunning for us. Guards ponies, I mean. Poisoned? I feel fine. He stopped. My magic. I'm sorry, but what? There's no such thing as a magical poison. My mind has been low all day, Lieutenant. I think that's what he means. Not a magical poison. A poison that targets mana. Fly clearly disagreed with the idea, but On pushed the smaller unicorn mare aside, moving forward to stand over shining armor.
Such a thing does not exist if you are very strict in your concept of a poison.
But I can guarantee you that Shining will survive the night. Ask Reckoning when you next see him, and he will explain further. As for you, Armor, it seems I was mistaken about your weakness. His weakness. Solo shot the towering guards while he carried Gaines. Wait, you knew about this?
Who else could have given him those bruises?
The sullen guardian mare responded, gesturing to the scouts and raised spots on Shining's leg and neck.
While we are speaking of this flag, I suggest you stop paying ignorance. I don't know if you truly still have faith in me, or if Alma here thought this would make a good plan to capture me. But you cannot take me alone, and he has no magic.
Flank was quiet, staring down at her hooves. Soldier On glanced between her and Shining Armor before turning away.
It is good that I am no longer a guards pony anyway. It would be inconvenient if I started another war with the Boers.
Her hooves carried her north toward the winter. Wait! Armor yelled, standing up. Soldier On, if you really aren't behind this, then tell us how to cure Luna! The Earth Pony didn't turn, though he did stop pacing for a moment.
I do not know, though I would not tell you if I did. Perhaps you can ask your sister if you do not understand. For now, my only advice is this. Luna will die. Feel free to blame me or Masquerade, but do not blame yourself. Equestria will need some pony to look to, and Celestia will not be up to the task. When you look for her conspirator or the pony who killed your friend, though, you are right to look to Stalingrad.
She trudged forward until the flapping wings arrived on the wind. Her head shifted upward, and she spoke simply.
I almost feel as if I should have been expecting you, Red Ink.
You weren't. I am imagining you expected to get away here with revolution, like you tried at Stalingrad. Thought you could be overthrowing Celestia?
Solzeron stomped. The cobblestone beneath her hoof cracked, and releasing dozens of stone shards. She trapped one under her shoe as she spoke in fury in her voice.
You could never understand my loyalty to Princess Ink. I do not expect you to. Today, I will flee Stalingrad and counterlot from both of your oppression. You intend to fight all of us, Armor, Flag, and I. You would be smarter to try and run like you were always doing in Stalingrad. Many times I saw your flank darting into alleyways.
Soldier stomped on the rock. As it flew upward, she spun and bucked it toward Red Ink. He dodged with surprising speed, keeping his forelegs folded across his chest.
Honor God has taught me a lot, Ink. Do me the commander did. Do not speak as if you were to be known to him.
Solzeron responded by lowering herself to the ground.
I have enough of your words. When you are as broken as your lying words, I will kill you. Confidence is surprising, I think. Do not worry on. I shall sing you lullaby when you are gone.
Armor watched as Red Ink flapped forward to hover directly over Solzeron. She rose on her hind legs. As he folded his wings and simply dropped. By his guess, she ought to have decapitated him with the first blow. Her bladed shoes aimed for his neck, but he twisted nimbly as he fell, using his wings to twist in ways Shining thought impossible. Rather than holding himself up and striking it on, Red Ink let himself fall all the way to the ground. Landing on all fours, the bulky but relatively small Pegasus was much lower than Solzeron's balancing form. His legs flapped once, sending his shoulder into her belly forcefully. The attack tipped her onto her back, and he leapt atop her. On kicked down, but Ink was too fast. For each attack the huge pony offered, he landed 2 swift strikes to her face. Blood began to trickle down her muzzle. Realizing her plight, Solzeron pressed a hoof down on the cobblestone of the Chocolate Market streets. Her incredible strength threw Ink off her chest, even as she rolled over to the street hooves. Her opponent caught himself in midair with his wings and landed level, ready to continue the fight.
Your assistance is being welcomed now.
Ink muttered a flag in Shiny's directions. The taunting tone of his humor had disappeared from his words, replaced with grim seriousness. Soldier On slid a leg over her muzzle. When the blood wiped away, Shining Armor was stunned to see no wound formed at all. The mare's flesh and coat were perfect, uncut and uninjured, save the little stains of blood that remained. He never heard of such magic at Earthpony before, and the idea was troubling. This time, it was On's turn to go on the offensive. As he galloped forward with massive strides in Ink's direction, he lowered himself, ready to strike. So he continued until he was within striking distance, and then leapt into the air. Ink's bladed wings covered for him, ready for a strike. It took him half a second to realize that nothing was coming, but in that time, Soldier On had cleared his body and made her way at a sprint toward a nearby market stall. Though her head was turned away from the fountain, she nevertheless managed to duck perfectly in time to avoid a trio of stunning bolts flown from White Flag's horn.
Don't do this, Flag!
On shouted as her host decimated the stall. Beams and planks shattered her strikes. I don't want to have to kill you! But you want to kill Princess Luna. You claim to be loyal to Celestia, yet you sacrifice her sister for revenge! Flag's horn ignited again. Soldier On led the way, with a long plank tucked under her leg like a lance, as the rubble of the rest of the stall assembled into a trio of wooden ponies. Seeing her distraction by the simple golems Flag had created, Red Ink flew quickly to stand behind the traitorous mare, flanking her with the wooden ponies. On shot a quick glance over her shoulder, then turned back to the original threat. When the Equestrias leapt at her, she grabbed the first tightly with both forehooves and spun. The rough, jagged hooves of the other two tore through her side and back like claws as he completed her motion, throwing the third at Red Ink. He dove out of the way, and then charged forward. With On's focus on the two wooden creatures, Ink was able to leap onto her back and wrap his forelegs around her throat in a chokehold. Even in that terrible position, On fought on almost unhindered. Her host smashed through the golems as if they had been made of mud rather than wood. Shattered to splinters, their magic faded, leaving the ex-guard's pony to face her rival. Rather than struggle against his grip, On simply flipped backwards, intending to smash the smaller pony's body with her own form into hard ground. Ink released his grip and slipped out from underneath the large mare, though not before her entire weight smashed down on his left rear leg. Ink's wings pulled him away, though he landed limping. As the scowl on his face spread, he shook his wounded limb to regain his motion. Then the Pegasus flew to the fountain and landed in the water. His eyes flickered briefly to shining.
Help me! Armor!
The unicorn stood up as Ink shot back into the air, trailing drops of water. Shining's attention was stolen away by a tapping on his armored shoulder. He glanced back to Going Solo, who was staring at him with obvious concern.
Shining, don't. You don't have any magic. Let's just leave.
The captain afforded himself a deep breath before responding, I can't, Solo.
What?
Shining Armor nodded slowly, pacing toward the battle. Though it was clear that Going Solo had more to say, she held her tongue as White Drag approached.
Captain Armor, your magic is stronger than mine.
With no more explanation, she placed her horn against the polished armor of his amethyst armor. Platinum's ward glowed and hummed with the infusion of raw mana from Flag's glowing horn. And Shining could sense the energy building at the base of the horn. Flag had given him a surprising volume of mana, and with that he was ready. On the far side of the marketplace, Red Ink took a heavy blow to the jaw from Soldier On's elbow. Thrown aside like a rag doll, his absence gave the captain of the Royal Guard a clear shot. 1, 2, 3, and 4 shots were directed from Armor's horn, all aimed for the traitor. Rather than face the onslaught, she leapt behind another open shuttered walls and took over. When the bolts had stopped, Armor took a moment to regain his focus as Red Ink stood up. On's voice called out from her hiding place.
Do not forget my warning, Shining Armor. Stay out of this!
I can't do that! Surrender and come out peacefully.
I know the God's pony speaks, Armor. Save your words!
Red Ink laughed, but rather than jovial and taunting, his tone was hollow.
She is afraid now. Too many of her for her to handle. Like wounded animal. Dangerous. We finish this now.
Armor gave a curt nod, and red ink flared his wings, revealing the thin blades across their chests. White Flag nodded as well, and the three approached On's hiding place. The market stall exploded as On emerged. Her host sent a pair of bladed shoes flying in the direction of the two approaching unicorns. By instinct, Shining Armor flew up his most potent shield. The metal weapons bounced off the rosy arcane surface, but through his horn, Armor felt their force. There was mana behind their strength. No mere muscle could give such an attack, even from Soldier On's bulking build. In the time it took Shining to lower the shield, the traitor charged at red ink. Rather than ducking back or shielding himself from the unrelenting force that was Soldier On, the Commandant answered by charging himself. They struck like freight trains, and the power was clear in the way their muscles rippled on impact. Ink brought both his forehosts together against the side of On's skull, smashing her ears and drawing blood with each blow. In exchange, On's still-bladed right forehost scraped across Ink's chest just below the neck. A stretch of fur and skin was as wide as Shining's muzzle ripped off the stallion, leaving behind a gaping wound of blood and muscle and exposed ribs. He stumbled backward, and Soldier On might have killed him there had Armor not intervened with another shield.
Damn it all!
Red Ink roared before his furious scream lost all language altogether, becoming a twisted mess of growling and shrieking. His wings carried him up to one of the nearby oil lamp streetlights, which he smashed with his bare hoof. The glass cut his arm, but it was nowhere near as frightening as the flaming oil that spread across his body. Shining, Flag, and On watched in stunned silence as the flame engulfed the honor guard's captain's body. His ruined trenchcoat burned to ashes. The golden orange blades on his wings fell away as the straps holding them in place were incinerated. The fireball that was red ink swooped down toward Soldier On, no longer being.
You'd pay!
He roared as a wave of his wings sent a massive wall of fire toward the mare. It was magic Shining had never seen, nor conceived of. His horn ignited, but this time it was aimed at the fiery stallion.
Stop it, Ink! We need her alive!
White Flag ran alongside Shining. Her own magic formed a shield around Soldier On. Shining might have criticized it on the practice field, but at the moment it held against the firestorm that issued from Rig's furious flapping wings.
She doesn't deserve to live!
Ink roared back. When the Pegasus found Shining's magic pressing against his wings, he turned his flames toward the encounter of the Royal Guard. Shining saw the fire coming, and made himself a shield. The tight bubble of rose magic was surrounded on all sides by tongues of red and orange flame. The guard's pony waited, while only the crackling of fire could be heard. It did not let up. Shining felt his borrowed magic growing thin. Every moment he held out the flames was a moment that White Flag's gifted magic dwindled, and his shield would not hold when the mana was no more. He put his whole focus onto his defenses, but it would take an outside intervention to save him. His ears perked to a familiar voice, overtaken by the fury of battle.
Don't you dare hurt him!
The flames lit up as Going Solo shouted at the flaming pony. The smoke parted just in time for Shining Armor to see the smuggler buck red ink across the face with both hooves. He winced at the pain that crossed her face as her hooves ducked into the fire, but the twist of his neck was enough to spare the captain a fiery death. Though the blow was strong, it did little to the rage that dominated Red Ink's whole being. His eyes locked onto Going Solo, and with the full force of his flying body, his foreleg was brought across her face in a powerful smack. Even from the ground, Shining could hear the crack that accompanied the blow. Solo was thrown to the air, and Red Ink sent a wave of flame after her. Her face crashed through the window, and in her wake, the structure was set aflame. Innocent voices screamed, and the unbridled hatred in Red Ink's eyes faded. The fire covering his body grew less intense, revealing his form beneath. Though his thoughts were his own, the Commandant still ignored the flaming building and favored Sailor On.
Your who's on? Your blood!
She offered no answer, instead focusing on ending the last brick of the brick golems White Flag had made to restrain her. Aware of the attention she earned from both Red Ink and Shining Armor, the traitorous guard's pony turned to a nearby building and ran. Rather than stop at the wall, the Earth Pony lowered her shoulder and plowed through the bricks like they were paper.
Just like the chasing hive! Flag shouted, You two, keep up! But Solo!
Flag cut out Shining's protests. I warned her, Armor. We have to move. Now! Red ink, by still trailing flames, darted into the hole in the wall. Shining Armor saw White Flag offer him a last glance before turning to follow. She knows we're onto her. She's trying to escape like she did back at Suida. As his companions left, Shining turned toward the building. Skylark A Apartments. The P was missing, leaving an awkward space beneath the wall of the climbing flames. Shining hadn't expected a wooden building to burn so quickly, but he didn't have time to lose on contemplation. The window was on the 4th floor, out of 7, 3 at the right door. With a count in his mind, the captain of the Royal Guard charged inside. Almost immediately, he could feel the mana in the air. Whatever Red Ink had done, the fire that burned in the structure was unnaturally hot and powerful. Its smoke was thick and choking. It filled the lobby in a dense haze. Shining prepared a light shield over his muzzle, hoping to keep in as much fresh air as he could, then made his way to the stairs. Up he ran, 2 floors, until a wall of flames blocked his path. He knew his shields could carry him through the fire, though how long they would hold, he was not sure. Instead, he turned to the 3rd floor hallway and broke into a run. The ceiling was burning, and smoke filled the hall. His eyes burned, but he couldn't spare the magic or shield them. Heat and sweat came built beneath his armor. His eyes darted from door to door, reading signs for room numbers, until he came to a little arrow next to a jagged line. Stairs. He broke into a full gallop, knowing every second was his chance his companion wouldn't survive. His host faltered at the sound of crying in 2 pitches. His eyes wandered toward the stairs, but his decision was made before he even turned back. He ran, listening and hoping as the sound grew louder. Overhead, beams creaked and flames crackled. Here and there, patches of plaster on the ceiling fell away to reveal beams and heavy boards. He tugged at them as best as he could and continued on, until at last he reached the source of the sound. The door gave in with a strong buck, though Shining felt himself panting at the effort. Inside, 2 foals, a colt and a filly, were bawling their eyes out in the crib. Shining glanced around, but could find no parrot nearby. Without a moment to spare, he pulled both babies onto his back with magic and cast a simple ward to hold them in place. The drain of his magic was light, but every drop mattered. He ran out of the room and further down the hall. He nearly reached the top of the stairs when one of the overhanging beams fell. A wall of fire. It blocked his path almost completely. His mind raced. Breaking it would take too much mana. Letting it lay, more still, he had only one option. A quick burst of his mana created a shield tailored against the heat. It wrapped around his own body, as well as that of his passengers. He felt Fly's gifted mana growing scarce, but he had no other option. He stepped back, and then ran forward and leapt through the flames. After that, the stairs went quickly. Up a single flight of stairs, he was confronted with terror. The 4th floor was painted in orange tongues that leapt up the wall and ceiling until nothing was safe. Worse, with his detour, Solo's room was at the far end of the hall. He focused on himself, took a deep breath, and charged. His shield grew weak as the fire lapped at his coat and mane. His hose fell fast and hard against the weakened floor, was shifted and cracked under his weight. Twice he was forced to leap over wide holes, and left only to pray that the ground on the other side would hold. He knew that he reached her room when he found a doorway without a door. Instead, a pile of ashes marked the direct path of Red Ink's fury. Inside, the flames had died down into a pile of cinders and holes in the floor. A pile of glass surrounded a charred and bloody body that barely resembled the smug pride that exemplified going solo. Shining Armor wasn't sure whether the water on his face or the smoke pressing against his eyes. He ran forward and threw the unconscious mare over his shoulders alongside the 2 sobbing foals, and turned back to the door. Then the wall collapsed completely. 1,000 pounds of rubble and flame poured down from the far side of the room, blocking off all hope of escape with flame and wood and plaster. Shining's mouth hung open, too decimated to make a noise of response. He simply stood there, wondering why. He turned back towards the broken window, but shook his head at the thought. He had nowhere near enough magic to teleport down. He might survive a 4-story jump himself, with luck and a good roll, but Solo and the foals would not. It was then Shining felt his armor's glow fade. He had just a surprisingly calm breath, as was accompanied by the burning scent of arid smoke. The temperature he felt grew suddenly hotter, as though he had stepped into a furnace. It was with those sensations his hope faded. Ing! The broken, gasping voice over his shoulder grabbed his attention, and he turned back to the awful scent of burning hair, and the grim sight of black scorched flesh covering a once beautiful robin's egg blue coat. Solo's eyes were red, and her ashes covered with ash. What are... Quiet, Solo. To his surprise, she slid forward softly. A short, dry, and ultimately unsatisfying peck landed his lips. When she pulled back, her cracked lips were smiling. Thank you. Hold on, Solo! Shining screamed. Though she struggled to obey, her eyes fluttered shut, and a soft breath brushed over the dirty coat of Shining's shoulder. Damn it! The guard's pointy head darted around the room, searching desperately for an exit. His bruised and tired form moved to the nearest wall, and he pulled back a hoof. A swift strike against a dent in the wall, but it wasn't nearly enough to create an opening. He pulled back and struck again. Again and again. His hoof ached. Smoke filled his lungs as well as his eyes. Tears dripped down his cheeks. And all seemed hope had faded before the cracked wall collapsed. He hadn't struck it. He stared in shock as an opening hung before him. Thanks, Celestia.
Not it, Captain Alma.
A mare's voice added, stepping out of the flames.
Follow me.
Soldier on? Your pony didn't answer, instead breaking into a run toward the nearby staircase. Shining followed without the luxury of questioning her motives, though the fatigue in his leg and the weight on his back left him much slower than the mare. All around him, the building collapsed. They reached the main stairs, where fire had blocked his path before. Soldier On walked away from the fiery doorway to a nearby wall. Without hesitation, she smashed it down with a two-legged buck. Rubble rained down on her head, but the dust cleared with a new way out. A short jump above the descending stairs. Shining followed the path gratefully, then broke into much of a run as he could manage. Never before had the frigid night air felt so welcome. The market was filled with the unfortunate denizens of the apartment. A sobbing mother saw Shining leave the building and rush toward him. Her words were hollow in his ears as the folds were pulled off his back. He spent his first few moments coughing and hacking, blinking and trying to restore vision not dominated by orange and red. Solo's weight was removed from his back, and it took him a moment to realize that Soldier On had taken the burnt mare. The trader stared back at the burning building with something like a remembrance building over her face. The orange glow turned to amber against her coat, dancing in patterns across her face. When the captain had recovered his breath, he spoke to her. You came back for me?
Not you. The children.
Soldier On looked into Shining's eyes, and he saw in her flat, expressionless face the most pain he could ever imagine.
You're a good God's pony in shining armor. I wish I had the luxury to be the same.
Why? Shining struggled to find his words. How did you...
It is very easy for me to buck a hole in the wall, Shining. It is also not easy to go through one. Ike still has not learned how I escaped him. She growled. Feel free to tell him when you see him next. He'll laugh when you speak of this.
Her hope gestured towards the flames. They sat in silence, as Shining found himself too tired to move. When he could not bear the burden of curiosity no longer, he spoke. Tell me, soldier. What did you do? On sighed and shook her head.
Nothing. That was my treason. I remained silent.
Her huge shoulders rose and felt a deep breath.
Take your friend to Canterlot. Whether you seek a doctor or an undertaker, the best are there.
She rose with a grace of ease.
A train leaves not long from now. I will take you there.
Shining stood and followed. Soldier On. Why are you doing this? Why help us? Why let Luna die?
You see the world through foe's eyes, shining armor. All black and white without gray. It is easy to see why ponies would follow your white over these.
Her hoof gestured to her own off-white coat, stained a bitter gray by the smoke of the burning building. Shining looked down at the smoke and ash and soot that stained his own coat, and wondered just how far he would have to go to find that truth. Rainbow awoke to the sound of an avian scream. It issued forth from the dense jungle, echoing amongst the mist into tree trunks until Pegasus could no longer discern its direction. She only knew it to be nearby. The sun was on the verge of rising, and its hollow orange glow had already ignited the night sky overhead, giving enough light to inform her that she had slept too long. Her tree was less hospitable than a cloud, as the aching in her lower back and wings testified. When she quickly rolled over to sit upright, the paired wounds on her flank erupted in agony. The crust of dried blood she could feel all covering the upper part of the white cloud depicted on her right side. Though she had been roused by the sound, the weight under her eyes told her that true rest hadn't reached her body. She watched the mists, listening and waiting. From time to time, the cracking of a branch or muffled gasp would escape the wall of hanging water, though nothing could be seen save shadows. When the silent pauses were broken, she realized that the sounds were coming closer. Her options flashed through her mind tragically briefly. The blades of her wings were still present. She could try to fight, but she had no intention of drawing blood after what she had seen, and if the threat did turn out to be reckoning, she wasn't so sure that she could hold him off again. Without knowledge where the echoing danger was approaching from, let alone other danger, running into the mist was suicide. Staying still spelled the same grim future. That left only one choice. Her wings spread swiftly as she recalled the last words of a dying elk.
You already hold the guiding paper, Rainbow. Luna slumbers west of here, at the Great Ridge.
A second scream of the same voice stopped Rainbow before she could take off. It was so close, no more than a dozen feet beyond her vision. She stood perfectly still, trying to avoid any tiny noise, squinting into darkness. A moment later, something struck into the trunk of her tree, and barely maintained her balance. A glance down was all it took to steal the warmth from her body. She saw blood spilled across the ground and a severed wing. It was huge, too big to belong to a pony, though the feathers were same layout. Its brown nose suggested a griffin. A moment later, a wet gurgling confirmed her suspicions, as a griffin body was flown into vision. "Kill him!" a feminine griffin shouted. Rather than a voice, the words were answered with a bloodthirsty roar. Rainbow didn't dare wait any longer, so she swept up into the air. Her wings, weighted down by their blades, panted through the air that seemed too thin to support them. Her desperation pushed her toward her when her muscles could not, slicing through the fog until she escaped above the canopy of the trees. A glance down saw only mist and leaves, thick enough to protect her from whatever horrors had been lurking so close only moments before. The next step was to set her path. The sun rose to the east. The fact was known to every weatherman in Equestria, and she was the best. Rainbow turned her back to the glow of Celestia's fiery orb, and spread her wings, and soared. Where her wings and back ached, her wings instead screamed of glory and pleasure. For the first time in days, she was truly free. Open, beautiful blue stretched out above her in all directions, as a wind rustled her dirty mane and bloody tail. A muted red diluted the streaking blur cast by the loose hairs, leaving her usually inspiring tale tainted with grim overtones. First and foremost, her mind was the scout himself. The sight of his empty eye socket, bleeding from dozens of shards of glass, still lingered in her mind. She promised him that they would leave together. Though she knew he made it out safely, the thought of leaving him alone in the jungle trapped with his own mind felt like she had failed him. Admitting that there was nothing she could do to help him was a bitter pill to swallow, and it stuck firmly in her throat, lingering on the verge of tears. A strange beast that Rainbow didn't recognize roared up out of the jungle. Wide wings spread from its leonine back and body. Rainbow half expected a griffin's face, but instead its head was bald, like that of a monkey. Its fanged teeth wrinkled, flesh roared, but it gave up quickly when it realized it had no chance of catching the young mare. She soared on for nearly an hour without further pause. What made her next stop was not a threat or an encounter, but simple awe. Gilda had told her of Griffin Ridge. She called it a big canyon, but the words were insufficient as comparing the ocean to a teacup. The problem with calling Griffin Ridge a canyon, it seemed to Rainbow, was that canyons had floors. Instead, she seemed to have found a seam of the world. The sheer, steep rocky cliffs in front of her dropped down miles and miles until fog and shadow obscured the spherical surfaces. Carved into the walls of rock, so you could see the facades of little villas and dens, with barrel-vaulted doorways and rounded edges. Jutting out of the stone were heavy logs forming terraces with bazaar-like stalls and shops. And then there were the griffins. From high above, Rainbow recognized them only as dots of gray and white and black and brown. They flew up and down, in and out of the little holes that made their homes, an untraceable chaos that was life. A mare might have flown down in there, were it not for the sudden and unexpected pressure of a talon that clamped down around her neck. Phoom! A pony. Oh, must be my lucky day. Death struggled, but the griffin's grip was tight and strong. The creature lifted her and turned her around to face it. It was a stallion griffin, and a large at that, more than a head over Gilda's weight. His beak was short and wide, and the feathers cresting his head had been forced back to stay out his angry golden eyes. Black fur covered his lion headquarters, where they weren't concealed by scaly armor and an immense axe. Hey! Let me go!
Oh, I don't think so, Spy. Ponies aren't welcome at Governments. The legate will decide what to do with you.
Hey! Rainbow slapped at his arm with her forelegs, but her blows seemed to bounce off him like calm waves. She moved a wing, and with surprising speed, he grabbed it by the shoulder. The pain that followed was intense, though no real damage had been done. Under gasping, Rainbow struggled herself. I'm not a spy! I came here to help Princess Luna!
I am not the one to decide the truth of your words, Pony. If you wish to be believed, you might not have come armed.
His talons moved to the straps of her wing blades, stealing them away. He tucked them into a folded pocket of his scaly armor, then produced a length of chain from the same conveyor. Rainbow watched uncomfortably as he twisted it with one talon until he had produced a strange, spider-like loop. Despite Rainbow's struggles against his action, he slipped it over her head like a collar. His free hand maintained tight control of the rest of the length of chain.
You're welcome to try and escape me, but if you fly off too fast, this will snap your neck. Now follow me, or I will kill you myself.
She was released rather bluntly and without warning, falling onto her rump on the dirt. Her hose briefly tested the bindings, but a sharp and painful tug prevented her from loosening them. Disgruntled, she took to wing and followed after the insistent creature. What's the big deal, anyway?
If you truly do not know, you are humorously uneducated. Our kinds were at war not even a full 6 years ago, Pony. Now, silence yourself, and do not waste your words on my ears.
They soared downwards, slowly, toward the masses of griffins below. They looked up as Rainbow approached, and gawked in awe and amusement as she was led past them like a disobedient pet. With every sideways glance and mocking glare, heat built in her cheeks until a fire of anger grew in her stomach. On closer inspection, the moving shapes weren't all griffins, however. A surprising number of zebras lived amidst the rocky outcroppings, as well as a few cows and pigs. They seemed weak and downtrodden, with ribs showing and bounding malnourished legs. Those few who could muster the will to look up at Rainbow did so with sorrow and envy, and in their gazes she saw broken spirits and desperation. To what little she could call fortune, however, their destination was not far from wing. A form of arches and pillars had been carved from stone near the cliff wall, centered around a towering circular structure, with lattice beams supporting an overgrowth of ivy, and towering openings serving as a small excuse for windows. Her militant guide landed at the edge of the forum, essentially dragged her along. The heavy wooden doors of the central structure gave way to a huge circular room. What Rainbow could have called torches provided light on the dark gray polished stone that made up the floors, walls, and ceiling. Some sort of paint added a hint of color here and there, but in the faint light, the dull colors only seemed to depress the room's unwilling occupant. At the far side of the space, a chair that bordered on a throne was centered on a raised dais. Lounging in it, lazily seating to the side, was a smaller, rather small, female griffin in garden blue. Her talons were picking through the bowl of meat on the table beside her seat. Idly, she slid some tiny giblet into her ungulated beak before she allowed her eyes to flit up to the pair of approaching beings. She saw the griffin guard, turned back to her food, then shot a glance again in surprise toward Rainbow. Immediately, her entire posture changed. Her wings folded properly behind her back, and she sat upright. Her bloody talons released her snacks and wrapped tightly over the arms of the chair.
Is that a pony, Matthias, and not a zebra? Yes, Legate. I found you sneaking around the West Ridge at Denmark.
Hey, I wasn't sneaking!
Silence, horse! He is not the one we've been looking for.
See! Rainbow yelled, only to be faced with a various gasp.
Lost running pony. Now, Matthias, we'll see and...
He nodded, tossing Rainbow's winged blades onto the floor. They slid with a sort of hissing noise across polished stone, coming to rest at the foot of the legate's dais. She glanced at them with amusement, picking one up and handling it as a child might with a new toy.
Blades for your wings. I suppose they would make a passable substitute when your kind lack talents. Now, pony, yes, as you have bluntly told us, what is your name?
Rainbow Dash, she stated boldly, and I'm here to save Princess Luna. I'm not a spy, or whatever you think I'm supposed to be. The legate tapped the tips of her talons together as he rested on her elbows across the arms of the sheet.
The Emperor mentioned that name, though I don't know much of its owner. Tell me, Rainbow Dash, what are you saving this princess from? Why come armed and unannounced? Who are you to be sent on such a mission?
Rainbow nodded. She was poisoned, but the doctors don't know what with. She hesitated for a moment, speaking with renewed vigor. I'm part of the honor guard, so I got sent out to find a cure.
Honor guard, a soldier in fact. Most interesting.
The legate turned to Malthus. A smile spread across her beak.
So much more fascinating than a zebra. Malthus, bring me that chain.
What? Rainbow flared her wings, resisting as the cold metal around her neck was pulled toward the dais.
A specimen as unique as you will make an excellent prize when I meet with the Praetorians tonight. They will decide if you represent the threat of a pony invasion. Perhaps I'll give you to the Emperor, though I confess the idea of keeping you for myself is tempting.
I'm not some pet! Let me go!
Let a pony free and gather it? You'd be torn to pieces in seconds. Our kind live long enough to remember the dishonors you caused us.
Rainbow struggled and twisted, but Matthias was stronger. As he was slowly pulled forward, an idea tickled the back of her mind. She crouched forward on her front legs and aimed a double-legged bug in the griffin's direction. Pain surged from the wounds on her flank, but she ignored them in desperation. She got a crack of thunder as she attempted, but the bolt of lightning meant to accompany it was nowhere to be found. The legate rose suddenly, wings flare.
An arrow, sir.
Malthus lacked her surprise and tugged on the chain. Rainbow was pulled toward him painfully by her neck, leaving her off balance enough for his talons to pin her wings. He stepped forward onto her belly, and the lion's claw at the end of his hind leg pressed against her chin. Her struggle died quickly, unable to stake the massive weight of the creature. They might have remained there for some time in silence, had the door of the chamber not slammed over, rattling the torches overhead. Legate! From around Matthew's leg, Rainbow could see a half-dozen heavily armored griffins limp into the room. One was bleeding heavily from the bast over his brow. The other was missing a leg. Haphazard bandaging covered most of them, though one smaller creature near the rear of the group seemed unharmed. It was her voice that spoke up next, hesitant and confused.
Dash?
She knew the voice, almost too well to be believed. Gilda? The legate looked down at Rainbow, confused.
You know, shut up, both of you. Saturnian, report.
We were attacked, Legate. We were doing deep border patrol on your orders. About a 10-minute flight out of the Elk Swamp. It started getting really foggy. It was weird. Our master Grethus couldn't do much about it. Then, something came at us.
The Lee Griffith's eyes hinted at fear as he continued.
It came out of the mist. We thought it was elk at first, but it was too small, and it could fly. We lost 3 legionnaires before we could even get a good look at it. It was pony.
The legate's eyes narrowed at Rainbow's direction as he spoke a simple word.
Continue. His legs were so bloody, his head been in a fight. He held a sword in his mouth.
Rainbow's eyes widened, and almost immediately she regretted the action. The legate leaned down to the side of her face, running a talon under her chin. I saw that pony. Is he your friend? This ghost in the mist. What is his name? Dash held her tongue, until the legate grabbed a chain around her neck and yanked on it. A choking pressure stole the pony's breath, putting dots in her eyes as she gasped for air. Stop it, legate! The young griffin yelled, stepping forward from the wounded crowd. To Rainbow's surprise, the pressure relented, allowing her to turn her head toward the speaker. Without her purple eyeshell and the white bang of her feathers hanging down her eyes, Gilda looked older and also angrier. Her body was covered in thick steel plates, adorned in pieces with spikes and thin blades. A thin purple scarf was coiled around her neck at the color of her armor. The legate glared. Centurion, who is this griffiness?
Legate, my apologies. This is Antildinia, daughter of Legate Tresius.
I don't need you to speak for me, Gilda snapped as the heavily decorated griffin who seemed to be Lear. And the whole name is just so lame. Just Gilda for me. The gate pinched her nose.
Tresius' daughter. Delightful. I have no interest in playing politics with you now, Gilda. So if you so kindly go back to your company, I will refrain from troubling your pet until matters have been taken care of.
Rainbow's words were cut off by Malthus leaning very heavily on her chest, forcing the air out of her lungs in a single gasp.
Thank you, Malthus.
The legate observed. Centurion, continue.
Yes, League. He was old, missing an eye. At first, we thought him conventionally. He was very fast, though, and faded into the mist whenever the two of us tried to get him. After we lost 3 more, suffered injuries on 6, we ordered a retreat.
The legate moved back to her throne, wearing a surprised expression.
Surely, Centurion, you don't mean to tell me you lost 5 legionnaires to a single-aged pony.
With respect, legate, they weren't mine to lose. I had been a Centurion for all of 20 minutes. Centurion Deimos was the first casualty. Senior Legendary Servius, his successor, was next. And with apologies, we lost 8 legionnaires. The legate glared at the assembled wounded soldiers, then slammed a talon down on a fist on the side of her seat. Her bowl of raw meat spilled across the floor as the vessel itself shattered to tiny shards of porcelain. She said nothing.
We think he's the one you wanted. He had the map on his flank, as you said, though I didn't get a good enough look to know where it was meant to go.
That is fine, Centurion. Of all days, today is the best to hear such news. The Praetorians will be arriving shortly, and they will make pleasant game of a hunt for this insipid creature. In the meantime, you and your servants are supposed to return home. Inform the new senior legionary that I intend to see them about filling the gaps in your ranks. As for Gilda, stay here. We need to discuss the fate of this creature. A talon flicked in Rainbow's direction. There was a long silence as the griffins poured out of the room. Rainbow watched them go from her place on the floor. With every wound, her mind saw Reckity's machete dancing back and forth, drawing blood without mercy or remorse. The thought was frightening. She now knew he was alive, although in his current state, she wasn't sure whether that was a good thing. When the door had shut, the legate had removed the wing blades from the floor and placed them behind her seat. As Malthus pinned the pony, she linked the chain leash to a hook on her throne, then gestured loosely with her hand. Malthus seemed to have understood the motion. He stepped back to allow Rainbow breath. She rose to her host, taking in gasping breaths. The gate, as usual, took command of the conversation.
So, Gilda, how do you know this animal?
Hey, lay it off, Legate. That's just cool. She's not gonna flip out or anything.
Given her compatriot's behavior,
I'm not inclined to believe that. But you haven't answered my question. Right, yeah, okay. So you know how ponies wanted hostages after the jungle war?
Legate's brow rose. Your father volunteered his own daughter.
He thought it would give us an in, you know? So I could be cool with them, if we needed to get anything stuff on their turf. Anyway, I got shipped off when I was just a cub, and stuck with this lame pony suit. or like a senator for them, who was in charge of making clouds on one of their cities. I hated it, until one day he took me up to one of his meetings. There was another one of the bigwigs there, who had a granddaughter about my age. That was her. Gilda pointed toward Rainbow. Rainbow Jazz. I see. The gate tapped the host of our towns closely. So your knowledge of her was only from your youth? Rainbow allowed her to knowledge go, realizing there was about 10,000 ways that Gilda's next words could bite her in the flank. Gilda shook her head. Nah, I caught her up with her a couple of years back. Must have been about 3 or 4, but a lot sooner than back then. I had a hard time fitting up in Grawl when they finally let me come home, so I wandered around for some time. I went back to see Das, figured she might have stay with ponies, since I knew him so well. Young Griffin shot Dennis a quick glance. She was still chill as ever, but the town didn't work out so hot for me. I see, the legate repeated. And yet I find it highly unlikely that this pony would turn up armed, mere miles from a site where another odd pony attacked and killed a scouting patrol of Legionnaires. Armed? Ha ha! Yeah, right. That's when her to fly. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've seen her slap some dweebs and bullies around fierce. Heck, I taught her how to brawl myself. But she never killed anything. It's not in her. Rainbow turned away from the gate and Gilda, hoping to hide the shame spreading over her face. Neither seemed to notice. She tells me she was sent here to kill a Princess Luna. Do you know that name? Huh? Gilda nodded. Yeah, I heard of it. She's like the Emperor, you know. Another god. Celestia's little sister, who she tried to the moon for a long time. Anyway, I heard Das here was on the one who stayed there in the first place, so I guess it would make sense. At those words, the legate glanced down toward Rainbow. A curious and troubling look spread across her face. Very well, Asiodenia. For now, the pony is your concern and property. Return her to me this afternoon for my meeting with the Praetorians, though I will have you face tribunal. The legate slid from the chain around Rainbow's neck and dropped to the ground. And I expect her back unharmed. A winged pony is valuable. Yeah, thanks. Gilda muttered. Come on, Des, let's bounce. Right with you, Rainbow answered, though her tone had much of its usual confidence. The events of the last hour, let alone that night preceded, had left her far too shaking and unsettled to focus on her coolness. Outside the round structure, Gilda almost immediately sat down and looked into Das's eyes. Angrily. Now that stiff is out of her feathers, what the fuck are you doing here, Das? Just as what I said, Princess Luna is dying and I need to find a cure. Okay. So why come to Griffiths? That's kind of a long story, G. I bet. Gilda shook her head, clearly annoyed. You look awful, Das. You want to go get something to eat? It didn't take Rainbow to fill up an enthusiastic nod. Yeah? Then follow me. But don't think you and I are all okay just because I bailed you out back there. You're still a lame flip-flop, Das, unless you are about to do something to change my mind. Too tired to care, Rainbow merely shrugged.